There we go. Good morning. My name is Mary Kay Fenton. I'm the Executive Vice President and CFO of Achillion Pharmaceuticals. Achillion is actually one of the oldest tenured of the, we used to call them, and I've been in this industry for a long time in Connecticut, we used to call them the Seven Sisters of publicly traded biotech companies. We lost a few for a little while, but now we're back. We were founded in 2000. Originally, we were cited to be a resident company of Princeton, New Jersey. And I remember very vividly with a predecessor of Dawn's at BioCT walking into a meeting where the head of the Office of Cooperative Research of Yale University proclaimed very proudly that Connecticut had just attained Achillion Pharmaceuticals because the company was determined that it would move from Princeton to Connecticut and not originally be founded there. So that was really a testament to Yale University and a testament to the cooperation that's required between universities. So Achillion originally was founded as a virology company. We are now focused entirely on a homegrown platform of technology around the human complement system, part of the human immune system. And we now have a series of 3 clinical stage compounds, all in phase 1 or phase 2 human clinical development across the globe, all compounds developed right at our labs in New Haven, Connecticut. So that with the introduction, I'll pass it to Jennifer.
Thank you, Mary Kay.
Please talk close to the mic if you
Okay.
can.
I have a loud voice, so you're set. My name's Jennifer Good. I'm the president and CEO and founder of a company called Trevi Therapeutics. We're based in New Haven, Connecticut. I founded the company in 2011. I had previously run a company called Penwest Pharmaceuticals, which was a publicly traded company working in chronic pain. That company was acquired by Endo, and when they acquired that company, there was an asset inside of it that was in early phases, and I went and negotiated it out and started Trevi Therapeutics. I founded the company with seed money from myself and my co-founder, as well as my board members from my prior company. And then we quickly linked up with the venture capital community. We've raised in the last 6 years, I guess, $110 million. We've got TPG Biotech, NEA just led our last round, which for those of you familiar with VCs is the biggest fund. We also have Lundbeck Fonden, which is a great European fund. So we've been able to attract very good venture money into the state. We are in phase 3 development with our assets and have grown the company from 2 of us working at our kitchen table to we now have about 12 or 13 employees, but also we've got jobs posted and we're hiring out of Alexion and BMS. I think importantly, and just to put in a plug for biotech, what's so great about it for the state, you know, the people I hire are all 6-figure employees for the most part. There's some that are support staff, but we have a lot of MDs, PhDs, masters in sciences. So it's a very good industry to foster growth. So that's the Trevi story in a nutshell.
Hi, I'm Josh Belinker. I'm the founder CEO of a company called Loxo Oncology based in Stamford, Connecticut. We've been around since the summer of 2013. We raised about $60 million of venture capital. We've raised about $600 million in the public markets. And we just signed a licensing deal with Bayer Pharmaceuticals, which brought in another $400 million just this past few months. We have we're currently at about 32 employees in the state of Connecticut, up from 2, and we're slated to go to 64 this year with a doubling. We focus on novel therapies for cancer. We like genetically defined cancers where we understand what makes a tumor tick, and we develop pills, mainly oral therapies, that inhibit very specific mechanisms that make the cancers tick in the first place. Our first drug, we hope, will be FDA approved this year, and we have several others in clinical development.
Thank you very much. I do want to make note, John Houston, President and CEO of Arvenis, was supposed to be here today, but he is actually closing around as we speak, so that took precedence. So with the success of your companies and how you've been growing and the money that you've brought in, can you delineate how much of that was out of state versus in Connecticut, and how much support has Connecticut given you so far?
So Achillion, since 2006, has been a publicly traded company. Our original venture money, however, did come from a syndicate primarily of Boston-based venture dollars. We originally raised what at the time was one of the largest venture rounds to launch a company. I think at the time it was $75 million. Since then, we've eclipsed that by, I think, a tenfold margin. We've now raised more than $750 million, and that includes public rounds. Now, of course, now that we're a publicly traded company, our dollars come globally. But it is very important to note that Connecticut Innovations was one of our seed investors, Yale University was one of our seed investors, and I think that that's one of the other important elements that the venture funding that companies have access to here in Connecticut is another very important element for launch.
So I mentioned we've raised about $110 million. We really did not get any of that from Connecticut. We got an original $50,000 grant from DECD. That was really more of a function of where we were as a company. My first round of financing, I was able to raise seed money from my prior board, and then we really needed $10 million, which isn't where Connecticut Innovations tends to play. I've always been in good conversations with funds like Canaan, so there is good venture here, but I do think somewhat it doesn't matter where your money comes from. I mean, venture is very fluid, so I think what we need to do as a state is support those initial ideas and how people get started and get enough data to get venture funding. I'm not sure sort of once you get past that preclinical, really early Series A, it makes a big difference where the money comes from.
No, I agree with those comments. If you're hearing some numbers thrown around on this panel, they're ginormous numbers. If this were a tech panel, we'd be able to start companies on less than $10 million, less than $5 million. That's not even walking around money in biotech. And so you really depend on an entire ecosystem of funding sources, which usually can begin as an angel funding source, then you graduate to VC, then you graduate to hedge fund public markets, then you graduate to mutual funds. And most companies progress through that life cycle of capital raising. And so just an unbelievably enormous amount of money to need to be raising all the time. And so you have to think nationally and globally, actually, for those sources of capital.
Thank you. With where your companies are today, what can Connecticut do to help support the growth of your company? What incentives can the state provide? And how do you feel about the talent available in the state?
I don't want to always have to take the mic first. I think one of the things that we are very in need of, and I think this goes to every bioscience company, is the need for talent. And one of the things that we are keenly focused on in our attraction of talent is mid-career professionals. I think one of the things that we get challenged by is the linkage between universities and the way in which universities can feed the industry. I think, at least in my company, and I think many companies that are in the emerging stage, you need career professionals who have been there, done that before. So the need for entry-level talent is not so acute. We have been able to attract a lot of people from other states. However, we have several employees, and we have an employee base of about 80 people. We have about 1/10 of those people who live out of state. And I think one of the things that we need to do as a state of Connecticut is to make coming to Connecticut a lot more attractive. And that means several things. It means having attractive, livable cities that young people and mid-career professionals want to be in. But it also means things like transportation infrastructure. Because my folks who live in New Jersey and come to Connecticut can get taxed for every income dollar they earn in Connecticut. But when they're working at their kitchen table, New Jersey's collecting those income tax dollars. When they come to Connecticut, Connecticut would collect those income tax dollars. So transportation infrastructure starts to matter, because the more we can bring those folks to Connecticut, the better off we are. And I think that also makes for a more robust working environment for our Connecticut cities that are involved in bioscience.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I would lead with transportation, because I think, airports are difficult when you live here. I drive to Kennedy almost every week. It's a pain in the neck, or Newark. So I think supporting Bradley or even Tweed would be terrific, I think, for the biotech industry. I ride Acela all the time. I think the more we can sort of support that coming through New Haven, Stamford is a good thing. So I would say transportation matters. This is a very sort of national business, so we're always out and about all the time. As far as talent, I've had actually a terrific run of hiring really strong people. The loss of Alexion and BMS downsizing has sort of bad for the state was great for Trevi. I was able to hire some terrific people. So one man's loss is another woman's gain. I would say that I do think, though, and we've supported Dawn in her efforts around a website hiring, we do need to organize ourselves as a biotech community much better. I'm just getting to know some of the other executives in this business, and to be honest, there's not that many of us in Connecticut. I should probably know all the CEOs and CFOs in biotech in the state, not only in New Haven, but in Stamford and wherever else they exist. And so, you know, whether it's funding BioCT, which is probably the right organization, we really need to support that organization, because I think there's a lot of crossbreeding that can go in there. There's a lot of mentoring of talent coming out of the universities. There's a lot of in-licensing. Just that whole sharing of ideas, I think, is super critical. We have no sort of formal way that we meet or do programs. You know, a few of us in New Haven meet for a beer every now and then, which is great. But I really do think that we need to organize the biotech community, because within that, it'll breed growth. I know Mass Bio is extremely well organized. As a matter of fact, I get invited to their events all the time and have been. It's a sort of a tour de force. So I would say that organizing the biotech community and transportation are our two biggest needs as a company.
On the talent question, that's a tough one. If you think about who the life science professional typically is, it's an advanced degree person in their 30s, 40s, or 50s with a family, and if you're recruiting them from out of state, their next thought is, well, what happens after I need a new job after yours? Maybe we're acquired, maybe we go out of business, maybe it doesn't work out. So if I'm gonna move my family, what's the next job? And that's a competitive advantage that hubs like San Francisco and Boston have over every other city in the country. It's not just Connecticut, it's New York City has this problem. San Diego has this problem, a lot of what we associate. And so I'm thinking about the critical mass question, and one structural advantage that Connecticut does have, which we take advantage of, is on Acela. I'm able to get to the center of finance of the world in New York City, and I'm able to get to an academic center in Boston, and everything in between. And it's a really nice situation that we have. We can get on a train in downtown Stamford and be in either direction pretty efficiently. And so it's hard to convey, but when you're in Boston, and if you're in Cambridge, Massachusetts more specifically, you literally see billboards for the Sigma Aldrich catalog, which is a nerdy science phone book that people order reagents from if they work in a lab. The fact that you can put somebody thought it was a good idea to make a billboard of that just tells you who they know their audience is. There's enough feet on the street that made sense. But there's a buzz, there's a hum when you're at coffee shops, when you're walking around lab spaces, high rises. It's just all everywhere. And I don't know that we have that yet. I know we don't have that yet. But when we can kind of get little hubs like that, maybe around labs. New York City has the Alexandria Center downtown, a gleaming, beautiful, mixed-use space of office and labs, a lab-use space. If we could get something like that around a university hub to make it a center of gravity for young talent, for mid-career talent, I think that's a step in the right direction.
Thank you very, very much. I'm sure your comments resonate with the audience, and I have a few more questions. However, I'd like to open it up to the audience. I want to make sure there's room for your questions. So does anybody have any questions for the panelists? Yes, please.
So, regarding talent, how good a job Connecticut high schools, community colleges, universities do providing not mid-level career, but mid-level talent to support your industry?
The question was how well do the universities do at creating talent for your industry? And are you if I can just take a quick stab at that. So everything that's being discussed here is in fact being discussed on many levels. Not only industry, but the government is listening to this right now, as well as academia. We are looking at snowballing the passion that Connecticut does have and creating a universal message that we're all rowing in the same direction. So, this is all going to come, and we need your support to have it happen. But what I wanted to mention is universities are trying to create programs to fit what the industry does need. Southern Connecticut, and I believe maybe Yale, but they work to create a program called BioPath, which is to do just that, to look at what does the industry need, what are the colleges teaching, and how are those skill sets being matched. And that's something we'll talk certainly more about. But let me let you guys go ahead and make a comment as well.
I think my thought is that it's, as far as our hiring needs go, I think universities in Connecticut are doing a very fine job of providing the kind of basic training that entry-level scientists need. But I think just as capital, venture and capital is global, scientific expertise is global. You know, very often if we're looking at very specific clinical needs or very specific biological needs, we cast a net to global universities and global expertise. KOLs could be found across the globe. So it's a little bit of a unique situation. Universities, University of Connecticut, Yale, Quinnipiac, et cetera, you can't be an absolute expert in every discipline. So I think we have to be global in that. But I think generally, I think it is true that universities are creating the right kinds of programs in terms of PhD programs as well as master's programs.
He's asking more about master's level.
Yeah, so I've hired a couple of these people, done internships. I try to be active. We're right near Yale. And I've tried to be active in bringing people in for summer jobs, giving them experience. I mean, I'm a mother of 3 of this generation. I find them phenomenally creative, innovative, well-educated. They always bring an energy in the office that I think is great. So again, we're a bit spoiled because we've tended to either pull people from Yale or some of them are kids that actually go out of state but live in the state, and so they've been high school, educated here in the high schools. They've been terrific experiences. I really think they bring such an innovative, intellectual, global view, and by the way, and really socialistic, a good social view of sort of what we're dealing with, which is so important in our industry. It sort of keeps you focused on why we're doing it. So I have to say that's really big thumbs up. I think they've got great feeder talent. The unfortunate thing in our business a little bit is you tend to hire PhDs, MDs, so it is sort of growing that younger generation and helping them through graduate school in the science field that I think is important. And so we do try to do that and hire them and get them work experience, but there's only room to do that with so many people.
No, I agree with the advanced degree comment. It is, these companies are largely populated by people with advanced degrees. I think there's a whole set of careers that I didn't know really existed before I got into this. We work in the sciences, but we're really working in applied sciences. And we engage in behaviors that are almost best learned through apprenticeship rather than formal classroom education. And I'm referring to things like clinical trials enrollment. What does it mean to capture good data from a clinical trial? We've gotten some great people who were trained at Yale in the academic setting in that way, and now have moved over to industry. There's statistics, biostatistics, data management, accounts payable, receivable, and accounting. So there are, but these are more services, and they're more, again, best learned by apprenticeship in many cases. And so a lot of the folks, I think a biotech job isn't someone's best first job. I think it's a great second job, but they often need a little bit of training. And that's where the large pharmas, and we have a few of them, are really helpful.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think there's so many jobs in clinical operations, as you're describing, and scientific operations that no one would ever describe to you in a course catalog at Yale University. I mean, these are jobs that you learn in an industry, and that's why critical mass becomes so much more important, because there are fabulous jobs in this industry for people who are not PhDs. We're, as it happens, we just filed our proxy, and one of the things that we have to calculate is the median wage in our company. And for a very small Connecticut company, our median wage is over $200,000. So these are very quality jobs that can be learned, as you reference, in apprenticeship.
I know there's a couple more questions, but real quick, just to this comment. I was at UConn a couple weeks ago at a seminar, and I walked away from there. I spoke to a lot of grad students and PhDs, and it was amazing that 90% of them have no clue what's available in industry. They've lived in academia setting for so long, and they are starved for information on what could I do with this degree outside of academia. So we're going to be addressing that as well. Yes?
I I was just going to speak to BioPath as an initiative that you mentioned. Oh, can you hear me okay? An initiative that really gets at the public outreach piece of this. And so in end of April, we're actually going to have an initiative. And Jennifer, you're going to be joining us, actually a symposium where we're going to bring students together to speak about specifically courses and programs that are designed to meet workforce needs. So I think BioPath has done that in terms of getting information from the employer. So we're going to continue to do that. So.
Want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Christine Broadbridge from Southern Connecticut State University. And so we've joined with the City of New Haven to create the BioPath Initiative, which is really about what you're speaking about today, which is workforce needs and providing opportunities for students to prepare them for biotech industry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stan, you had a question? Yes.
I'm Stan Choi from BioCT. I think my question is more towards critical mass and our industry in the state of Connecticut, because even though we're a very small state, our industry is very diverse. We have companies in Stanford, we have companies in New Haven, Farmington, and around the state in Groton. Do you feel it's important to have a cluster, to identify a cluster like Cambridge, even though it's, there's a lot of companies within a radius of certain square mileage? We are very broad and diverse. Do you feel that it's critical for the state and for our industry to be more centralized to create that critical mass we need?
I feel really strongly that's important. I only know executives in New Haven. I've never met anyone from Stanford or Farmington. This is the first time I've met Josh. Nice to meet you. That's crazy for a small state. And I think we either need to identify clusters or we need to support groups which will much better bring this together and start bridging that gap. We're not a huge state, so I assume it can work if people are a little bit spread around, but I do think there needs to be a mechanism to start sort of fertilizing within the state in these different clusters. But I do think Josh is right. Cambridge is amazing when you're up there, the energy, the idea flow, the jobs, who you meet. That's such a healthy thing for our business, so I think it would be very positive.
I'm very passionate about this critical mass issue, but I do think that, and as much as Cambridge does have that buzz, and I'd love to create that buzz, I think we have to be innovative about finding ways to create that buzz within the context of a small state. I live in West Hartford. I've driven to New Haven for 18 years. We are a small state. We have to get over a half an hour drive. Let's get over it. It's half an hour.
Here,
We
here.
are one industry. Exactly. And we have to be this, and I'm coming to Stanford now, and I'm definitely going to take you to lunch, because we have to get over these small distances. We are one state. We can get over this. We have to be innovative about that.
Yes.
So my name's Valerie Horsley. I'm a professor at Yale, and I appreciate the comments here, and I don't think we are doing a good job of pairing expertise with industry, either for our students or our faculty. But I also wanted to pick up on the mid-career recruitment initiatives. We do this all the time when we recruit faculty, and there really has to be a building of a community to be able to recruit those people, because you have partners that both need jobs. And so I'm wondering if there's some way that BioCT or the government could provide incentives to bring the talent to Connecticut. I was brought here because of incentives that were built through Connecticut Innovations, and I think that's another way we could bring talent to Connecticut.
Thank you. Yeah, I know that is something that's being looked at. We've done a lot of investing within the state, which has been fabulous through Connecticut Innovations. But the government also needs to look at how do we recruit to Connecticut and build that buzz and that desire to be here. Thank you. How are we doing on time? I can't hear. Okay, good. Any other questions? Yes. Oh. And please give your name as well.
Hi, I'm Chirag Patel with Parexel, and you spoke a little bit earlier about the things, the jobs that are in clinical operations and such that aren't usually in academia. My question is not really about where the stage that your companies are at, but really when you started. What could the service providers do at that stage when you founded your companies and you were starting off? What could large service providers or any service provider do to have helped you at that point? Are there thoughts around that?
I have thoughts. Go ahead.
I think one of the things that is helpful for us in a couple of other contexts is provide one-stop shopping. One of the things that young companies are challenged by is everybody wears 17 hats. So if you can provide a one-stop solution that can minimize the number of people within an organization who can do a function, I think that can be exceptionally helpful to growing organizations.
Yeah, I agree with this. And Par Excel is part of what's called this CRO industry. So people like us, we don't do all of our own trials hands-on. You engage somebody to actually run them, and you oversee them and manage them. Unfortunately, the CRO industry grew up under sort of the big pharma model where they had huge infrastructures, and I agree with Mary Kay. I had a huge amount of frustration when we got going because CRO industry say, oh, we want to be in biotech because, of course, it's the largest growing piece of the life sciences industry, but they really didn't do it well because they didn't understand that when you know, I'm going to live and die by this drug and I'm going to live and die by this trial, you need to do a really good job with it. You need to put the right resources on the ground, and you need to put people on that think like biotech people where you wear 17 hats, not I have 6 units and I have to sit on 5 team calls a week. That just didn't work at all. And I got really, really frustrated by that. So we ended up trying to bring more of that in-house and try to manage CROs like they were big pharma. So I think your industry needs to adapt to be able to support biotech in the way that we operate.
Anything you want to add, Josh?
No, I think it's an interesting question for the attendees here because it just reflects how complicated the businesses we're involved with really are. There's you said 17, there's probably 27 different activity sets that go into building a drug. They start at the bench, but they progress through all sorts of domains that you might not think. Quality assurance, manufacturing, supply chain management, statistics, regulatory, animal toxicology, clinical pharmacology, preclinical testing. There's lists and lists of things, and no one company, no one partner, no one vendor can do it all. So a lot of these businesses become sort of transnational or international relationship sets. And what I think the skill set that biotechs need most are managers of these relationships, people who are sophisticated enough to coddle and coax good work out of these vendors and these partners. And that's what a lot of folks on our team do. You always work with other partners, but you can't really, quote, outsource it all. You can't just trust that somebody else is going to care as much about your project as you do. You can find partnerships of agreement and do it collaboratively, but you can never truly outsource it. So that's an opportunity, I think, for the workforce in Connecticut because there are these extender models out there, but we can do a lot from our little desks in Stamford.
Wonderful. Any other questions from the audience? You see someone right there behind the pole. Oh.
Oh, sorry, do you mind that? Okay. Hi, thank you all for being here. And so I'm interested in your experience as a founder and navigating that founder's experience through building a company in Connecticut. I just started a biotech, and so this is a multifaceted journey. So, what support did you get throughout? What helped you to navigate this journey successfully?
And what is your name and the name of your new company? And congratulations.
Oh, thank you. My name is Jonathan Fenstead, and the company is Neuropsych Therapeutics. So we're bringing together a new compound for oncology and neuroscience out of Yale.
And we're looking forward to you being a BioCT member.
Thank you.
Jonathan, that's a good question, and good luck, by the way. I would say that I really did not get support, nor could I find a good group to help me when I started this company. Fortunately, I had been a CEO before this, running a company, so I had relationships with lawyers and bankers and investors and all the people I needed, so I was sort of experienced at it. I do think, though, that's a huge need. We have groups that should be a place you can go and sort of partner and get some input. I also think that's where sort of getting these trade groups that are united and having some mentoring programs within that, where people can introduce you to investors. We're all about raising money, and you all need that sort of first introduction of, hey, you should talk to this guy. It's an interesting company he's starting. So I think there's just a lot of ability to, again, cross-fertilize for people that have been on the journey, because I really got no help from the state, nor have I ever really found a place to go to get that if it exists.
I mean, you need three things. You need money. You got to obsess about the money, even though it's probably not the background you came from or what inspired you to start the company. But yeah, I feel that it's 80% of the risk of a biotech startup is just the money, and getting it at the right time and the right quantity from the right sources. I think it's always the least fun part of it, but the most essential. The second part is just talent and understanding what critical pieces you're missing and what things you bring to the table, but versus also what gaps you have that can be filled in by others. And third is just being relentlessly focused on clinical data. So this is not about, these aren't science projects, they're not IP generation machines, they're companies that need to justify their existence based on the drugs they build, and the drugs they build justify themselves by the clinical data they post in well-run clinical trials. And so seeing everything through the lens of clinical data and how do I match the money that I need, the runway that I need to get to that clinical data, and having that message really, really crisp and having a vision for how feasible that is or not is essential. So nobody's going to give you sort of a runway to do science in the private sector for years and years. There is a very impatient, I mean, VCs have at most 5-year time horizon. They'll say 5, they'll say 10, but they really mean 3. And if you're lucky, and hedge funds have a 12-month time horizon. So you have to see all of your projects in the context of those timeline expectations, whether they're told to you or not, and then craft your story when you're fundraising with that in the back of your head.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question right there. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Myrna Watanabe. I'm a grant writer. My question to you is, what keeps you in Connecticut? Or I could ask you the inverse of the question, is what would convince you to leave?
Great question. No, stay. Not leave. No, that's not the question. What will help keep you in Connecticut is the question.
I mean, I wound up here because I took a job in finance in New York City after working at FDA, after training as a doctor. I didn't tell you all that. But so I have a personal commitment to the state and don't plan to leave. And so the way, in a sense, I've accommodated the geography pressures of building a business is I've just opened other offices. So we do have a presence in California and Colorado as well, but we don't plan to leave, even though honestly, a lot of my board members who come from out of state from the very beginning would scratch their heads and say, why here? Can you really build it here? Can you really get the talent you need here? And I've had to defend Connecticut quite often. And so these little things like the capital tax, which add insult to injury, when we've paid $1 million in taxes just because we've been successful in fundraising. Like the audit committee will ask me about that. So I have to be able to justify my existence here. We're not leaving, but again, it's relationships. It's just being established and feeling like this is home, and it is. So I'm not going anywhere, but I've had to defend that position against the question all the time.
Well, we hope to ease your pain.
Yeah, so I lived here. That's why I founded the company here when I started. I do, and I had to fight the battle a bit too of why don't we go to Boston or even New York. The rents are reasonable here, much cheaper than sort of New York City or Boston rents. The transportation's terrific. I've been able to hire some great talent, which I don't have to worry that sort of the downside of the whole Cambridge scenario is people hop jobs every 2 years. You look at a resume of people out of there, they're moving all the time trying to get more money. You don't have that in Connecticut. People are here for lifestyle reasons, and I think as long as we have high quality companies, it can foster that. The only issue I hear from my board members, for instance, they'll never do board meetings here because their comment is it's so hard to get to, and that's the transportation issue, where everyone gets into Boston and New York easily. I just want to make one final point before we sort of sign off here. I do think as executives in this business, not only do we have an obligation to hire talent and do things, I've really tried hard with this company to support the services industry. I try to hire lawyers from here. I hired someone to do my web design from here. So when I'm looking to buy services, I try to keep that money in the state because, you know, we spend 25 to 30 million a year. As much as I can keep that in Connecticut as opposed to raising money and doling it out all over the country. That isn't always possible, but I do think as executives, that's another way we can help support the state, is to try to keep our money we're spending in state when we can.
I think for us, similarly, we have to fight the why in Connecticut battle constantly, and it really has to do with being able to hire expertise from the pharmaceutical industry, being able to bring it into Connecticut, being able to find it, yes, but to find it in sufficient quantities across a variety of disciplines. But I think the thing that, and I'll go back to critical mass, it's a little bit of chicken and egg, a little bit of, you know, build it and they will come, trust us. But I think the critical mass is the most important thing for trying to ensure that we can get talent, attract people who could go then to the next job. And frankly, what I'm hoping is that Bob's area up in Cambridge just gets so darn crowded and so darn congested and expensive that people continue to remain in Connecticut.
Right. Thank you very, very much. With all the wonderful ideas and suggestions that have been had today, I just would like to know whether you're a member of BioCT or not, please sign up for our news alerts. They come out and we will continue to provide solutions and programs to help with all of the questions and et cetera that came up today. So thank you so very, very much to all of you. You did a great job, and thank you very much.